What is up, my dudes? It is me, Jay, Cactus.kid, back with a video about comics, because comics are fun to draw and to write. I created the comic Aquaphobia. It's being uploaded on Tapastic every Tuesday, and if you want to check that out, it's in the description below. Also, I have a video already uploaded on my channel about how I paint my comics, and it's a lot more relaxing than this one, and it is solely just painting. So if you're interested in that, it'll be in the description below. It'll also be in the cards. Let's get into the video. Okay, so how to make a webcomic. It's a question a lot of people have, and in my opinion, the beginning is always the hardest part to tackle because it's just so daunting. You have to get down the plot, the characters and their arcs, dialogue if you're writing a script, world building, etc. And you also have to balance out creating an actually entertaining and intriguing story with the right levels of drama and comedy, etc. But it doesn't actually have to be that complicated because everybody has a story to tell. And if you are here watching this, that means you've already taken the first step to translate that story into a graphic novel medium. Sometimes starting off, deciding to actually try, that is the hardest part of the creative process. So, congrats! You're here. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about story, but I'm also going to get into the technical aspect later on of maintaining an audience and, all that. So stick around to find out about that. And let's get into story. So story is the bare bones of a graphic novel. You can't have a piece of sequential art without at least having the barest structure of a story skeleton in place. And of course, it's all subject to change because you are the author, you make the rules, it's your creation in the end, which is the best part about doing this solo. So always keep that in mind. There are no rules. This is solely just you. Graphic novels are interesting as they are a direct marriage of art and writing, and I might go into the drawing aspect in another video, but since this is such an extensive topic, that's just for another time. So it is my firm belief that a good story comes from intriguing characters. You could have the most mundane plot, but with the right characters and all the right interactions along with a well thought out arc for them and the relationships between each other, you could find yourself this masterpiece. For example, the show Friends or The Office. It's basically these buddies that live together in New York and, some people that work in a paper company. And I mean, it's, in concept, it's boring. It's just, daily life. It's slice of life. But considering the interactions between each character and how the characters are written and how they grow throughout the series, people get invested. They want to see these characters. They watch because they want to see their favorite character, etc. And both of these shows are considered some of the most famous American television shows to this day. So to tackle all these bullet points like plot, characters, arcs, dialogue, the first thing you need to get down really is the character and their relationships with other characters. You can't really have a story without a character. You can even bring world building into the mix by actively thinking about how this certain person reacts to certain aspects of the world, the government in it, the physical properties of the setting, etc. It's basically a creative free-for-all. And once you get some characters down, the plot can come a lot more naturally. I mean, you don't necessarily have to develop the characters first, though. I know that's sort of a contradiction, but there really is no hard and fast rule to these things. For my comic Aquaphobia, for example, I already had gotten sort of the bare bones of Finn, the main character, but when I nailed down the initial concept of the comic itself, being that she gets water powers despite being super afraid of the water, that really helped me open up her characters to the possibilities. She's a very tough girl, so playing with her reactions to her powers, if there was disgust, fear, how she got over that fear, and even Lily's role in being her support throughout that time and afterwards, that all came from developing the plot, sort of. It's a very fluid process, so honestly, don't stress. It can go in either way, and so if you're not going to the T of what I'm saying, don't stress about it because it's just my personal experience. I personally suggest that you keep a notebook or like a notes file on your phone and jot down any plot ideas or even dialogue, personality traits and arcs and events that you might think of. Because you might think of this idea and be like, oh my god, I'll just remember it, but then you'll have that nagging feeling later because you can't remember and it sucks. I hate it. Don't do that. Don't be me and be stupid. Basically, if you have this, you can rearrange all of these ideas into a timeline and mix and match, and you've got a book plot, or you've got this library of ideas to pull from. The best thing to start with, I'd say, is where you want your characters to start out at the beginning of the story, physically, emotionally, mentally, etc., and where you want them to end as a person. Then, with the middle, you can stuff in as much as you want and structure the plot and events around the question, how will this affect the character and their relationships? How many different directions can I take this? And just go from there. It can also be vice versa, structuring the character's arc around the plot and having the characters react in the way they would to the plot, but that's only if you have more of the plot cemented down, because it's harder to sort of change, in my opinion, because the plot is what drives the main story anyway. So I would suggest, and I personally prefer the other way, to go with characters first, because it's a lot more flexible in my opinion, but again, that's just my opinion. No stress. So that's the basics of developing a plot. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them down below. If there are enough, I might make another video answering them. So yeah, on to the technical aspect of running a webcomic. Okay, so this is mainly about good habits, time management, and commitment. I am guilty of being bad at all of those things. So if you are bad at that, then I mean, here I am. So don't worry, don't worry about it. So first, pick a style that is not too complicated. This is a tip that actually comes up in almost every webcomic advice thing I've seen, and it's true because, okay, so when I did Aquaphobia, I wanted to make it all, connected to the water theme, so I chose to do watercolors as the medium, and the problem with watercolors is that it's very time consuming. You have to wait for it to dry, and it's a very tricky medium to get used to. So when I look back at my old pages, the colors are kind of dull, and it's a bit sloppy, and it's, kind of like, but if it's also a lot harder to edit later on if you want to go back to a different page that you did. Maybe like I'm on page 22, I want to edit page 1. It's a lot harder to do so than if you did digital or even like ink, because then like it's a lot more clarified, the lines. But honestly, watercolors are a great medium. So if you decide to do that, link your comic because I really want to see it. I have seen so little watercolor based comics. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. So yeah, pick a style that's not too complicated, not too time consuming, because readers are going to spend like 5 to 10 seconds looking at each panel, I'd say, and maybe like a minute or two looking at each page, and that's for slower scenes. Action scenes, you should not be spending so much time on action scenes. I know some artists actually tend to discard drawing backgrounds for some pages because it's not necessary and you don't even notice it. Like sometimes I'll look back on the comic books that I have from other artists and companies and all that, and I'll look at each page and I'll be like, wow, this entire page does not have any backgrounds, or this person does not, have an arm in the background, etc. And it's stuff that you don't notice at first unless you're really looking for it. So don't be too anxious and be like, oh no, if I don't get this detail down, I'm gonna be shamed for life. That's not gonna happen. Don't worry about it. Try to keep the process as fluid and flowing as you can. That's not to say that you should rush it and make sloppy art, but if you find yourself agonizing over a crap ton of detail, just take a break and take a breath, make yourself a cup of tea, and come back to it and ask yourself, if you were reading this, how much would you care about that super detailed suit of armor in the background? Of course, it's all up to how much time you have, though. So if you're willing to make a super detailed piece, I know a couple of really good comics that are super detailed, painted like each panel is a painting, then all power to you, because that is super hard and super impressive and honestly, super awesome. Another thing that's good to think of is a color scheme as well. Lighting, of course, can vary depending on the mood of the scene, but try to have a palette in mind for each section of the book, or the book as a whole. For example, Aquaphobia tends to have lots of turquoise, purple, red, and yellow. Keeping it consistent really makes sure your pages don't look too murky or busy, especially if you have a limited palette, because if you have too many colors, it gets super like, whoa, I can't focus on this, there's so many colors everywhere, and it's really hard to match them and make sure that they don't clash. And like, I mean, there's no shame in using a small amount of colors. I mean, it's used all the time in the industry as well, video games, movies. comics, all that. For example, the game Life is Strange uses a lot of yellow tones and a lot of purples and a lot of pinks, because that's the vibe that they're going for, the sort of mood that they're trying to set for the game as a whole. And that's what you should be thinking about, the mood that you want to set, and trying to like accentuate what is going on in the scene while keeping to a certain sort of theme, if that makes any sense. It also is sort of like a dramatic factor, because when you come to a really important scene and you decide to change the color palette in it, for example, let's say that I'm taking another scene from Life is Strange again. I'm sorry for spoilers, but there is a scene, throughout the game, it's all, really sunsetty and bright, but then there's this really dark scene later on, and it's where the main villain comes out and reveals himself. And it's a really dramatic, very creepy scene, and the lighting is stark white, and there's like no warmth at all. It's cool white lighting, fluorescent. The shadows are blue and black, and it really helps the scene stand out. And that's what you can do for your comic. If you change up the color palette, lighting and color is so important to setting mood. It can honestly make or break your comic, and it can really help an important scene, stick in the minds of your audiences. Color is such an important thing to study, and I really suggest watching a video on color theory, because it's really interesting and it can really help you with even like cementing down your writing and all that. Also, consistency is key. Along with the color palette, it really helps to have a little swatch kind of sitting around somewhere. Make a character reference sheet, please, just with the most defining features at least, because while character designs might change over time, it's always good to look back on a character. It doesn't matter if they're your character or not. You gotta get down all those details, because it really helps solidify everything, and make sure that you're drawing the characters the same every time. Otherwise it gets kind of confusing and inconsistent, and that's just kind of unprofessional. Alright, if you're writing scripts, like dialogue scripts, don't try and write the whole thing at once unless you have a lot of time, or if you're particularly motivated, because it tends to be very discouraging when you just want to start seeing some finished pages. And I don't know, I'd say maybe limit yourself to 1 to 2 chapters at a time, right? Keeping your plot in mind, of course, throughout the process, and just drawing the pages after around a chapter or 2 of writing. For uploading, the sweet spot is around once a week. Tapastic lets you schedule pages, which is why I mainly upload on there, so I don't have to worry about it. I upload every Tuesday. This is good because it lets you obtain a little buffer time to drop, more pages in between, so you can rest easier. And another thing is, don't start uploading when you finish the first page. You gotta wait to finish a few more, so you're not as pressed for time, because it'll get stressful and demotivating. You don't want to burn yourself out. So what I did was, over the summer between school years, I drew 22 pages and started uploading them this summer. That gave me 22 weeks to make more pages to upload. A lot more relaxing. It also gives you leeway time, so if you're sick or on vacation or something, you don't have to worry about keeping up with drawing, because you have a lot more extra pages to upload. Don't forget to cross-post on different social medias. If you promote your comic on your social media, it'll increase the chances of getting more eyes on it, which is nice. But don't be obnoxious about it, and also don't be too discouraged when not a lot of people see it at first, or sometimes at all. For my project, it was really slow for me in the beginning, and I had the advantage of having a sizable Instagram account too to promote Aquaphobia on, but I was still getting 10 people. And besides, if you're making a comic for fame and fortune, well, webcomics aren't very profitable in the first place, and that's not really the reason you should be taking on a creative endeavor anyway. It's just gonna leave you with this hollow feeling, and you'll lose a lot of self-esteem, so please don't do it for your mental health. Last and final point, webcomics are honestly, in my opinion, a lot nicer than waiting till publishing to release your work, because releasing page by page leaves you open to valuable critiques, so you can improve as you go, and it builds up a fan base as you work your way up to the being published and print ready. It also kind of makes sure that you have people out there interested in your work when you print stuff. Okay, so that's all I really have to say for now, or at least all I could think of. So again, links in the description, and as always, make sure to leave a comment if you have any questions, and I will answer them. See you next week.